they exploited an existing division. There's a difference. If there is no controversy or dispute between two parties, and somebody chooses to invent a fight between the two of them, that is called divide and rule. But if there is a pre-existing division, and someone chooses to take advantage of it, that is not called divide and rule. It's called use the division and rule. The creation of our neighbors to the left and right, to the east and west, was not the product of an overnight decision of a foreigner. That decision was already taken by an existing segment of the population, at least for 200 years, before the partition. Because that division existed for at least 800 years before the partition. I am not here to offer answers. Perhaps what I will do is that I will share a few questions so that, befitting the campus in which this conversation is happening, students go back with questions to work on, as opposed to me spoon-feeding them with answers. If two segments of the population or two communities have peacefully coexisted for thousands of years, does common sense tell you that a division was created between two communities within a period of 1 year, or 2 years, or 5 years, if they have peacefully coexisted for thousands of years? If the answer is a no, then the basic question that you should be asking is, did they peacefully coexist for thousands of years? That is perhaps the more important question to be asked, considering the ongoing events in our neighborhood over the last few weeks. 3, let us assume for a moment that the much-hated figure, namely the politician, is always cunning, is always selfish, and is looking out for his self-interest. But what do you make of the people who support those decisions? After all, the public participated in those decisions one way or the other. Partition was not a decision that was taken by a politician without support from his people. In fact, there was democratic support for the decision, which was clear from the elections of 1946. So perhaps when we wish to draw lessons from the partition 75 or 78 years down the line, in my opinion, these lessons should have been drawn in at least 1947 or 1948. We are doing it 75 years late. But at least now we should be framing the question properly and asking the right questions. Whether they are comfortable or uncomfortable doesn't matter. And since you are asking this question and opening up this topic for conversation in an institution that is dedicated to science, science doesn't care for sentiments, it only cares for the truth. Similarly, history doesn't care for sentiments, it only cares for the truth. Now, if you choose to fabricate history and you don't ask the right questions, you muddle those questions, you will get muddled answers and garbled answers. So if you're serious about revisiting history and drawing the right lesson based on facts, you must be open to be challenged by history. Facts presented by history, documented facts, are bound to cause discomfort and discomfiture. You must have the ability to swallow it. There is no point in saying Satyameva Jayate if you cannot handle Satya in the first place. So over the last 3 to 4 years, people like me, or even better qualified people than me, are engaged in serious pursuit of understanding history or re-understanding Bharatiya history. Because in my view, history almost tends to repeat itself. And we are, according to me, in a phase where perhaps the situation of 2024 is closer to the situation and the circumstances of 1924, when Khilafat 1.0 ended in December 1924. It is possible, or perhaps we are inclined to believe, that national identity prevails over and supersedes religious identity. We have tried to walk with that experiment for close to 75 to 78 years now. I will not offer any conclusions. I will ask the audience, or members of the audience, to ask themselves this question: do you truly believe that the last 75 years tell us the story of a situation where the Indian identity has prevailed over religious identities? If the answer is a no, my simple question would be, when do you think we'll wake up and smell the coffee? And realize that this experiment may not be working despite our best intentions and efforts. History is not meant to be consumed as pastime. You don't read it like a novel or an Amar Chitrakatha book over dinner. It's not meant to be consumed as an academic pursuit. History is meant to be understood as the causes of the present and the potential future. We are where we are because of events of the past. And we will be where we will based on the events and decisions of the present. If you're a believer in karma, and if you're a believer in Bharatiya philosophy, then you must necessarily come to the conclusion that the situation of the present is a product of the karma of the past. And whatever you do or don't do, both actions of commission and omission in your present will have consequences for the future. So I am not here to push any particular agenda on how I want people to see history. I will protest members of the audience, especially the youth, who consume information from Instagram, from YouTube, from Facebook, Quora, Reddit, and so many other platforms, formerly Twitter and now X, to be very careful about what you consume through these portals. Everybody has their own point of view. I am no exception. So perhaps you are better off consuming information through rigorous sources, and that is perhaps the most boring suggestion I can give you, which is to read more. If possible, I would request members of the audience to take an active interest in the developments, or let's call them regression of developments, on the eastern side of Bharat, in what was previously called East Pakistan and now called Bangladesh, and who knows, it might become East Pakistan once more. Please follow the developments closely. Based on your reading of the developments, ignoring everything else what everybody else has to say, please start asking certain questions. What is happening there? Why is it happening? Is it even remotely relevant to Bharat and our circumstances? If the answer is a no, great. If the answer is a yes, then you must ask yourself a few more questions. What do we do to prevent a similar situation? In my view, if you had asked people in the 1900s or even in the 1920s, if they could remotely think of or predict the potential partition of this sacred land called Bharat in 20-25 years, that is after 1924 when Khilafat ended, if you had asked them, in less than 25 years, do you think Bharat will be divided on religious lines? Most of them would have said impossible. Not possible. We are all culturally one. Our religions may be different, but we speak more or less the same languages. We have similar cultural traits. Culture will prevail over religion, and nation will prevail over religion. That was the statement that you would have heard from people of the 1920s of Bharat. By the time they reached 1940s, mentally they understood that the situation had changed. And by the time they reached 1946, Karachi and Lahore resolutions of the Muslim League specifically told us that Pakistan was going to be a reality within a year. By hook or crook, through democratic means or by force. So it doesn't take even half a century for circumstances to change or worsen. It takes less than that. It depends on how aware and prepared people are. I am not a pessimist, I am a realist. But I do believe that the generation of today is not remotely as prepared and aware as the generation of the 1920s in terms of the challenges that face Bharat. I don't think children should be blamed. I don't think the youth must be blamed for this. I would only request their parents to take history much more seriously, to take culture a bit more seriously. This comes from an engineer turned lawyer. So I'm not exactly the arts graduate who's basically telling you to focus on history and to ignore science. I know the value of science as much as I know the value of history and culture. You can pursue science and go to California, but your identity and culture will not leave you. So, if there is one lesson that I would request students, it's a request, it's not advice. I know you have a particular hatred for that word. So let's call it just suggestion. That you should walk away with from this conversation. History is important, culture is important, identity is important. And every civilization or country which has lost its way and its identity has lost itself to the future. Europe has achieved development at least 30, 40 years or maybe even 70 years before Bharat. We are several years or decades behind the least developed country of Europe. But Europe today doesn't have the ability to protect its culture or its civilization because it has completely lost its sense of self and identity. I am not saying sacrifice development and science and infrastructure for identity. I am saying all of that is meaningless without retaining your identity. Both must go hand in hand. Perhaps that's one of the reasons when I see policy, I believe that it's an utter mistake and according to me a catastrophic mistake when you separate scientific education from arts education or humanities education. We must have a trend where we actually give dual major degrees of diametrically or seemingly diametrically opposite subjects so that students of science have a better understanding of humanities and students of humanities also understand science better. Otherwise, people coming from the humanities stream think that people from the scientific stream have no understanding of the arts and vice versa. There is a mutual contempt which I see in schools and colleges. Those who are bad at mathematics but who understand arts are seen as poor students. And those who understand mathematics but don't understand arts are seen as people without taste and class. This is how education works. And ultimately, when you grow into an adult, you will see its direct consequences when you realize you don't have the ability to make sense of the developments around you. Because you've been so keen on pursuing physics, chemistry, and mathematics that you don't understand how do I make sense of the political, cultural, and national and international developments around me. Every country which is worth its salt and which takes itself seriously prepares for the future by investing in education and specifically history education. In my view, even after 78 years, we are far behind as far as that question is concerned because we have taken forward the terrible education legacy of the colonizer without having an Indian education policy which speaks of Bharatiyata, which speaks of Bharat civilization and philosophy. We seem to have made a beginning and we have started taking baby steps. Why have I suddenly started speaking about education when the conversation is supposed to be about partition horrors? Because you understand history primarily through your textbooks when you're in schools. And if you don't take education seriously, then in the formative years when you're supposed to have a very clear picture as to who you are and where you come from and what is Bharat as a nation, your mind becomes the playground for competing forces. where everybody is trying to brainwash you one way or the other. So, even in African countries, after colonization, rather decolonization or political independence, they've invested better in education policies than Bharat. Bharat doesn't need to look up to America, Singapore, or any other country for education policy on the aspect of history. It has a lot to learn from African countries, for God's sakes, such as Kenya, South Africa. With His Excellency being present here, with the Director of IIT being present here, my only suggestion would be that it's easy to reduce partition to politics or human selfishness, but there are deeper causes, much more sensitive causes, delicate causes, which may not be to everybody's liking and taste. The easier way to address this, or at least the simpler way to address this in the long run, is by capturing the causes of partition better in our history textbooks. Because there's no point in trying to convince an adult if 20 years of his school education and college education have taught him otherwise. It's very difficult for them to overcome that barrier and that preconceived notion. Investment in the future is through investment in the past, and investment in the past is through investment in education in the present. Vande Mataram, Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Such wonderful, overwhelming response. We have the entire auditorium full. Thank you so much for being here, for learning about the partition, and for creating an awareness. Thank you so much. We now humbly request the Honorable Governor to felicitate our guest speakers. We request the Honorable Governor to felicitate Lieutenant R. Madhavan Pillai. A good round of applause. It is a blessing that we are able to see him, we are able to be with him, we are able to learn about him. The only INA veteran who is alive. Thank you, sir. We request the Honorable Governor to felicitate Tirumati Veena Agarwal, the descendant of Lala Lajpat Rai. Thank you, sir. We request the Honorable Governor to felicitate Thiru J. Sai Deepak. Thank you, sir. We now request the Honorable Governor to honor Tirukuldeep Sagri, manager, and his wonderful team, who are all set to perform a dance drama depicting the partition being organized by the Song and Drama Division of CBC Chennai. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We now humbly request the Honorable Governor to address the gathering.
Director, IIT Professor V. Kamakoti, Lieutenant and INA veteran R. Madhavan, descendant of our great freedom fighter Lala Lajpat Rai, Srimati Veena Agarwal, Sri M. Anna Durai, Sri Kirlosh Kumar, the distinguished invitees present here, faculties of IIT and other institutions, my dear students. Today we are solemnly remembering all those who gave their life and suffered what we call partition of India. On this day, 77 years ago. We know that it was a devastating tragedy, man-made. About 15 million people were displaced, they were rendered homeless, they became refugees. Over 1 million people were killed, slaughtered, and several lakhs, and by some conservative estimate, over 5 lakhs, girls and women were abducted, raped, and converted. Pakistan was created and the immense horror that inflicted on all of us, on the whole country, attempts were made to forget, erase from our memory by erasing it from our textbook, creating concocted histories. It was made to appear as if this was like a bad dream, perhaps. And since a section of people wanted to have a separate country, they got the country. And that's the end of it. In fact, we have been trying to play it down so systematically that when I hear the word partition, it itself, it makes me ask a question. Partition is a very familiar word with every one of us. In our families, partitions happens, property are separated when brothers part. When USSR broke up, why didn't they call it partition of USSR? When East Timor broke away from Indonesia, why didn't they call it partition of Indonesia? Why didn't we call it a breaking of Bharat? Why do we call it a partition? I think the words have enormous power to play in our psyche. It was intended to downplay. Having said that, and the fact that it was a devastating tragedy, and we must not forget what happened. But what is more important is it something, an event of the past? And so it is important only to know is from a merely historical perspective as an event of the past? Or is there something more to it? Friends, this breaking up of Bharat was not breaking up. It was a violent assault on the very idea of Bharat. This country, Bharat, which we all know, several thousand years old, it evolved around certain philosophy, certain values. And the core of those values is an inherent belief that the entire creation is one. This is what our ancient texts say. that the differences that we see, not only among humans, but also among plants and animals, these are apparent differences. Incidentally, any student of biotechnology today will tell you that we share our genes with every life form, be it plant, be it insect, be it animal. Interestingly, 60% of our genes we share with bananas. The oneness of creation. Our people knew it and revealed it several thousand years ago. And this was a wonderful, a magical revelation that could create a society wherein people with diverse languages, diverse food habits, diverse cultural practices could live together happily, respecting each other. And that is how we live together all these. When I think of, say, few incidents of the past, let's recall about 2,400 years ago, when Acharya Bhadrabahu left Pataliputra with 12,000 of Shramanas, the devotees, and he walked down. Imagine 12,000 people, what could have been the population of Bharat at that point of time? With 12,000 he walked, came to Sravan Belgola and came to Arihantagiri in Tiruvannamalai district. He passed through many kings, many kingdoms. There were arrangements for them to be received, to be fed, to take rest. We know Bharat was not built by any king or any ruler. It was a civilizational evolution. When I think of 1500 years ago, when a Pallava prince from Mamalapuram, with about 500 of his assistants, left and went to Nalanda, studied, became Acharya Bodhidharma, came back after teaching a couple of years at the great University of Nalanda, went to China, spread Bodhidharma. Imagine from Mamalapuram, with such a large number, 1500 odd years before, going all the way, as a prince, he didn't have any problem. He was received well. Nearly 600 years ago, long before, there are countless numbers. We know how Adi Shankaracharya, several thousand years ago, from here, he went all this country. Well received, well respected. So many people went. About 600 years ago, from Assam, Kamrup, Mahapurush Shankar Dev, a great saint who lived for 119 years, my friend, 119 years, like Ramanujacharya. He traveled from Kamrup, came to Rameswaram, studied, came to Kanchipuram, studied, went to Kasi, studied, went back, and he composed a poem, Dhanya Dhanya Bharat Bhumi. Nearly 600 years ago, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he traveled all the way to nooks and corners of the country, came to Rameswaram, stayed there for over 6 months. There were many rulers, but society was one. People were one. When my grandmother, over 120 years ago, she traveled from a village in Bihar, visited all the Tirtham, came to Rameswaram. She told the stories. She didn't realize that she was going to any foreign land and she was going to a different place. Everywhere she felt it was her own country, her own people. Today, even today, near the tri-junction of India, Burma and China. There is a place called Parasuram Kund, Kranti. Thousands of people from all over the country go and visit there as a tirtha. This Bharat prospered, thrived. Not that invaders didn't come in the past, they came in the past also. To quote one, about 170 years before the Common Era, when the Bactrian king, Menander, invaded from the northwest, captured Jammu and Kashmir. He was interested. He was told that people of Bharat were highly evolved. They were very advanced in science and philosophy. He was very interested to know. And then he asked, then Acharya at that time, Jammu and Kashmir was predominantly inhabited by people following Bodhidharma, Buddhist philosophy. Nagasena was Acharya, main Acharya. Menander invites Nagasena to teach him what was the philosophy. There was a long discussion, and at the end of it, Menander became Bharatiya, became Milind. And the conversation between the two is a canonical text of Buddhism called Milindapana, questions of Milinda. They became like us. This was the beauty of this country. Until about 1,000 years ago, when some toxic ideology that my faith is the only faith, is the supreme faith, and it has to prevail, others have no right to exist, then the tension began. Then the conflict began. And rest is history. It continued. Eventually it led to breaking up of this country, beautiful country, Bharat. But did it just stop there? It didn't. Because people, those who were, it was, as I said, it was an assault. It was an assault, a violent assault on the very idea of Bharat. How can you say that every faith is to be equally respected? How can you say that the whole universe, whole creation is like a family? No, it is not. My faith is the one, my God is the supreme, and you have to follow him, or you have no right to exist. When such a toxic ideology, which has no place in this country, Bharat, which is antithetical to the very idea of Bharat, because if we accept it, because if that ideology succeeds, there is no Bharat. Bharat will break into pieces. Because Bharat, the whole philosophy or the whole idea of Bharat is inclusiveness, celebration of the diversity, appreciating the underlying unity. But that idea was defeated. The idea was defeated, and partition happened. And then the people, those who were responsible at that point of time, they continued defeating the idea of Bharat. It didn't just stop there. When Pakistan captured major part of Jammu and Kashmir, and we tried to forget it, it was again a defeat of the idea of Bharat. When China captured a large, over 30,000 square kilometer of Aksai chain, and our Prime Minister told in Parliament that it's a rocky desert where not a blade of grass grows, let's forget it. It was an assault on the idea of Bharat. when Kaba Valley, a fertile land of Manipur, was given away to Burma. People of Manipur have not forgotten that. They still, it's an incident, horrific incident for them. It was again an assault on the idea of Bharat. When Kachadiu Island was given away, which was a livelihood of our people, our fisher folks, for them it was a life and death. It was a part of their life. It was given away. A result is today, our fishermen are shot, arrested, their sole instrument of earning bread, boats are sunk. Politics is played, but the fact is, those who did it, they again at that point of time caused violence to the idea of Bharat. That the idea was defeated. Time and again, right from independence, for over 6.5 decades, the rulers of this country tried to defeat the idea of Bharat. They targeted the institutions that sustained, that nourished, institutions which were the watering holes of this Bharatiyata, the values, the temples, the tirtham, the centers of Indian knowledge systems. They were all targeted by omission or commission. When, by fraud, during emergency, the word secularism was introduced in the Constitution of India. It was not that the first time, it was even during the Constituent Assembly debate, this issue had come up. And there was overwhelming, all near unanimous view that in India, a Bharatiya value is Sarva Panth Sambhav, equal respect to all faith. Secularism is an European concept, born out of conflict, hostility between the church and the state. And that led to the separation between the two. Bharat, it was not possible. So, in the Constituent Assembly, it was thought not worth including because that was an alien concept. It was not a Bharatiya concept. Bharatiya concept was all are one. Respect all faith. And when in 1976 this was brought in, even at that point of time, the gentleman who introduced the bill, Sardar Swaran Singh, on 26th and 27th of October 1976, while piloting the bill, he spoke on those very lines that our secularism is not European secularism. Our secularism is equal respect to all faiths. And yet, when it was brought in, it was made European. Our textbooks were purged. We were brought up on the story of Ramayana, Mahabharata. Students post 75, 76, they know nothing about it. This was an assault on the idea of Bharat. When in the first decade of independence, when the problem started in some pockets of Northeast, then Prime Minister of India wrote a letter to the Chief Minister of Assam. He wrote a letter to the Chief Minister of Assam that people in that region are not Indians. We have to win them over gently. He said they are not Indians. Imagine, think of, much later, nearly 3 decades ago, when I was given a responsibility to look at the Northeast. I heard people telling me a story of Sri Rama. I went to Karbis, they have Karbi Ramayana. I went to Khasis, they have Khasis Ramayana. Went to Jayantiya, they have Jayantiya's version of Ramakatha. I went to an Idu Mismi tribe in Arunachal Pradesh. They said Rukmini was our daughter. In fact, I have narrated this incident many times. It is worth repeating. Because when I was staying in the house of one Idu Mismi tribal chief in the village, I found that the whole tribe sports tuft, chutia. I was curious to know how. And the old man tells me, Rukmini was our daughter. She was in love with Sri Krishna. Her brother Rukmi wanted to marry her off to someone. Rukmini informed Krishna. Krishna came, fought Rukmi, wanted to kill him. At that point, sister sought Pranadan, don't kill my brother. And Sri Krishna shaved his head off with his Sudarshan Chakra and left the tuft. Now I ask all those people who say that they are not us, when did this story go there? Every nook and corner of the place you find Bharat present. But we choose, for whatever reason it was, to defeat the very idea of Bharat. And that is going on even today. Even today, when our country is rising, we know that at the time of independence, we were the 6th largest economy in the world, despite all the exploitation by the colonial rulers. But thanks to those who managed the affairs of the country, by 2014, we dipped down to the 11th. We became from the 6th to 11th economy in the world. In the last 10 years, we have come to the 5th, and the world is confident that and we are confident, there is no doubt, in the next few years, we will be the 3rd largest economy of the world. Till about a decade ago, India was not in the reckoning. Nobody cared for Bharat. They all looked upon us as a populous country, poor country, not worth the wait. Today, no major decision of the world can be taken without Bharat being on the table. There is optimism. Every field, our youth, our farmers, our women, everyone. Look at this institute, IIM Madras. I had attended one event here, and I was very pleasant to know. I was pleasantly surprised to know that this institution attained the target of 1 patent a day. 366 patents, Professor Kamakoti, if you are right, you told me, and I listened to that in the meeting. This is New Bharat. New Bharat, emerging New Bharat. When we see all around positive stories, growth, there is an attempt to create chaos. There is an attempt to spread lies that everything is wrong. Assault on Bharat continues. They are using all possible means. Largely they are funded from abroad. Billions of dollars being spent to create anarchy and chaos in this country. Constitution is in danger. Imagine. Our institution, judiciary, left, right, center, they keep giving beating to the government. They say, no, it is compromised. Election Commission of India, compromised. Imagine. The institutions which are acknowledged around the world for their fairness and robustness, they are there is a concerted attempt to cast doubt over them and create in the public mind a suspicion about their integrity. This is taken from the textbook of anarchist toolbook. Lower the public confidence in the institutions. This is precisely being done. Somebody sitting in the United States of America writes a report, and you see the ruckus all around. Time and again it is proved it is all manipulated, it is all with a design to either destroy our economic growth, crash the market. But no, there are people who will jump at it and keep spreading around the lies and trying to lower the morale of the people. Our armed forces, everyone knows that our armed forces are much better equipped than before. Today, imagine such a large country, such a large armed force. We had the distinction of being the largest arms buyer in the world. Smaller countries, talking peace and selling weapons. We were buying weapons. Now we have become, thanks to our private sectors, Bharat has become an exporter of defense wares. We are now exporting weapons. Our military is far more better equipped, stronger than before. And yet, when they achieved something noteworthy, attempts are made to question the very truth of their achievement. Put a question mark on their valor. These are all concerted drive to keep India weak. And these are all the people who are members of the Break India gang. भारत के टुकड़े होंगे, ये नारे लगते थे, and people are doing it today, trying to do that. My young friends, I urge you all to be curious, to learn, to see, and don't be gullible. Don't be carried away by this false and malicious propaganda to create chaos in the country. Partition of India, the horror is not over. Horrors have been inflicted continuously. Partition of Bharat is a work in progress by all those guys, those who have caused the partition, those who have broken this country, and those who are continuing, not sparing any opportunity to break this country. It is not a mere an event of the past. It is a looming danger of the present, and we have to be alert. And I am sure we will prevail. I am an optimist. I am a firm believer. I am a firm believer, like as our country people, in our society, in the strength of our people. If we are achieving today what we have achieved and what we are achieving, which has brought this country from the margin to the central stage of the global affairs, it is not because of government, it is because of our people. And I have full trust we will defeat them. We must remember the lessons of breaking India. Must keep the horror in mind, because there is a great lesson. And also remember that this mission of Break India was not a one-time affair, it is continuing. Somebody will try to break it in terms of race and language. This is how Dravid ideology came. They started saying, no, we are separate, we are different. They refused to accept Bharat as a Rashtra, as a nation. No. This Break India gang will not succeed. Our country has the strength. Our institutions are strong, but more than that, despite all these 1,000 years of, and even subsequent over 6 decades of post-independence colonization of this country, our social institutions are still not that weak. They are doing phenomenal work to keep the society together. At every crisis, we have seen the strength. Be it COVID, we saw our people's strength, how people came forward. Any crisis, and people come forward. This is the beauty of Bharat. This is the strength of Bharat. And we have full trust in this strength. Nevertheless, let us not forget what happened on 14th August 1947 and what has been happening thereafter, time and again. Let us resolve that all those forces will be defeated, and they will be defeated. I have no doubt about it. My dear friends, thank you very much once again for the listening. Jai Bharat.
Thank you, sir. We now humbly request the Honorable Governor and the other dignitaries on the dais to move downstage to witness the video on partition, followed by a cultural program organized by the Song and Drama Division of CBC Chennai.